The Wasteland discovery, the sun was little more than a red smear in the sky, drowned in dust and ash that never seemed to settle. The Wasteland stretched in every direction, endless plains of cracked earth and twisted metal, the bones of cities that once stood tall now buried beneath silence. Daniel walked with steady steps, the crunch of grit under his boots the only sound for miles. He carried a rusted pack on his back, half filled with scrap and rations, always searching for something worth trading back at the human outpost, where survival was bought with whatever you could carry. The Wasteland was dangerous, filled with broken machines, old war mines, and the poisonous air that burned if you breathed too deeply. But Daniel had learned how to move through it like a shadow. He had been out for 3 days already, longer than he planned, and the thirst burned at the back of his throat with every breath. The land was cruel, but he kept walking, driven by habit more than hope. That was when he saw it, something lying motionless among the rocks, half hidden under layers of dust and torn cloth. At first he thought it was only a fallen suit of armor, another relic left behind from the war. But then the shape shifted slightly, as though still clinging to life. Daniel's heart quickened. He approached carefully, his hand tightening on the knife at his side. In this place anything could be a trap, but as he stepped closer the truth came into view. It was not a machine, not a suit, not even human. It was a girl. Her body was thin, fragile, covered in strange pale skin that shimmered faintly with veins glowing soft blue like the lines of light, running beneath cracked glass. Her face was marked by exhaustion and pain, her lips dry, her breathing shallow. She was unlike anything Daniel had seen so closely before. The war had left the human outposts filled with stories of the enemy, of their cruelty, their weapons, their strange alien power. But this girl looked nothing like the monsters people whispered about around firelight. She looked scared. She looked broken. She looked as if she had been alone for too long. Daniel knelt down beside her, brushing away the dust that clung to her. Her clothes were torn and burned in places, the edges scorched as if she had been caught in an explosion. He could see wounds. Along her side where shards of metal had pierced deep, though her blood was not red, but a faint glowing silver that leaked sluggishly. It pooled weakly on the ground, sinking into the dust and vanishing like water in sand. She opened her eyes. At his touch barely, and for a moment he froze. Her eyes were not human. They glowed faint green, wide and filled with both fear and a pleading light, as if begging him not to leave her. Daniel swallowed hard. Everything inside him screamed caution. This was the kind of thing his people warned about, the kind of danger that got scavengers killed. She was alien. She was the enemy. She was supposed to be the reason why the Wasteland even existed, why whole cities had burned. Yet when she looked at him, all he saw was a dying girl. She tried to speak. The sound that left her throat was weak and broken, words in a language he could not understand. Her lips moved slowly, her breath rasping, but no meaning reached him. Still, he understood enough. She was asking for help. Daniel's instincts battled in silence. He could walk away, and no one would know. He could pretend he never saw her and return with his scrap, safe and alive. But the thought of leaving her here, her glowing veins fading in the dust, gnawed at him. He had buried too many people in this wasteland, human and otherwise, and he knew what it was to feel helpless on the edge of death. He touched her wrist carefully, feeling the faint pulse against his fingers, weaker with each beat. She had minutes, maybe less. His mind raced. His supplies were meant for him alone: basic bandages, filtered water, a small injector of human medicine, but none of it would be enough, not for her. Her body was different, fragile in a way he did not understand. He remembered an old outpost he had passed on the way here, half buried in the earth, filled with machines left behind by the aliens during the retreat. He had avoided it, afraid of what traps might still hum within its walls. But now it was the only chance. The girl's breath hitched, her chest rising shallowly. Her hand moved weakly, fingers brushing against his arm, not to hurt but to hold. It was a gesture so human that it tore something inside him. She was not an enemy in this moment. She was simply a life on the edge of being lost. Daniel made his choice. He slid his arms beneath her and lifted her as gently as he could. She was lighter than he expected, fragile bones and thin muscles, as if she had been starved for weeks. She gave a faint sound of pain but did not resist, resting her head weakly against his shoulder. He tightened his grip, securing her with one arm while the other steadied his pack. The wasteland stretched far, and he had to move quickly. Each step felt heavier with her weight, not because she was a burden, but because the risk grew with every breath he took. If he was caught carrying her, others might see him as a traitor. If he failed to find working machines in the outpost, she would die in his arms, and he would carry the memory forever. The red sky above burned like fire, the air thick with grit. That stung his throat, but he kept walking. He did not let go. The wasteland around him was silent, broken only by the sound of his boots crunching on the cracked ground, and the faint, uneven breaths of the girl he carried. Daniel kept his eyes forward, every sense sharp, knowing time was slipping away. The outpost was his only chance, and every heartbeat reminded him that hers were running out. In the dying light of that ruined land, one man carried the last hope of a stranger he should have hated, but could not. The struggle to save her. Daniel pushed forward through the wasteland, the weight of the alien girl in his arms, testing his strength with every step. The land stretched endlessly, broken ridges of stone and twisted remains of old machines, jutting out of the ground like bones of giants. The wind carried with it a dry metallic taste, scraping his throat raw as he breathed through the cloth. Mask tied over his face. He tried to ignore the ache in his muscles and the sharp pain in his back, forcing himself to keep moving because each moment spent slowing down meant her breaths grew weaker. He could feel them against his chest, faint and uneven, as if she were clinging to life only by his will to carry her forward. The outpost was still far, a half-ruined place left behind after the war, hidden in the folds of the desert where machines had once watched the skies. Daniel had seen it from a distance before and avoided it, knowing it was filled with rust and broken walls, but now it was the only hope. The thought of reaching it drove him, step by step, as sweat mixed with the grit on his skin, and the horizon shimmered with the heat of the dying sun. The girl stirred slightly in his arms, her lips moving again, forming words he could not understand. Her voice was soft, almost like the sound of water dripping in a cave, unfamiliar but strangely gentle. He shook his head and whispered to her, even though he knew she could not understand his language either. "Stay awake," he said, his voice hoarse. "Just hold on a little longer. I'm not going to leave you here." She blinked slowly, her strange glowing eyes focusing on him for the briefest moment before they closed again. Daniel felt panic rise in his chest. He could not let her slip away before they reached safety. He tried to remember what little he had seen of alien physiology during the war, scraps of knowledge passed around among scavengers, rumors of how their blood carried energy, how their bodies needed strange light to heal, but nothing he recalled was enough to help. He adjusted his grip and pressed on, whispering words not for her understanding, but to keep her tethered to his voice, to life. He told her about the outpost, about the path they were taking, about the stars he had once seen from the human camp, anything that came to his mind, speaking as if the sound alone could anchor her spirit to this world. The ground became harsher. As he neared the ruins, rocks cutting into his boots, ridges forcing him to climb carefully while keeping her steady in his arms. His breath grew ragged, his legs trembling from the effort, but he refused to stop. He thought about the faces of the scavengers back at the camp, how they would look at him if they knew what he carried, How they would whisper that he had lost his mind. Maybe he had. But leaving her behind would have been worse, and he knew it deep in his bones. At last, the outline of the outpost appeared ahead, a collection of jagged towers leaning against one another, half collapsed, their surfaces scarred by fire and time. The gates were torn open long ago, twisted metal left to rot, and silence ruled inside. Daniel crossed the threshold carefully, his eyes scanning the shadows for movement. The place felt abandoned, but sometimes machines still stirred in such ruins, and one wrong step could mean death. He held her close and moved through the empty halls, the echo of his boots carrying far. Inside, the air was cooler, heavy with the smell of rust and burnt circuits. Strange markings still lined the walls, glowing faintly in some places, fading in others. They pulsed weakly like veins of light, reminding him of the girl's own glowing skin. Perhaps this place was once filled with her people, voices speaking in that gentle flowing language he had heard from her lips, but now only silence remained. He searched through the rooms, one after another, finding nothing but broken equipment and shattered panels. His heart pounded harder. She could not wait much longer. He laid her down gently against a wall, her head resting on his pack, and quickly checked her breathing again. It was shallow, almost too faint to notice, her skin dimmer than before, the light in her veins flickering. He felt helpless for a moment, anger boiling in his chest, anger at the war that had left her like this, anger at the silence of the world around him. He clenched his fists and forced himself to move again, desperate to find something that could help. In one chamber, deeper within, he stumbled across a machine that still hummed faintly with life. It stood tall, shaped like a cradle of light, its surface marked with alien symbols and screens that flickered dimly. He could not read the words, but he understood enough from the design. This was a place of healing, some kind of medical station, left behind when her people fled or died. His chest tightened with both hope and fear. If it still worked, it might save her. If not, it would waste what little time remained. He returned to her quickly, lifting her once more, though his arms trembled with exhaustion. Her head fell weakly against his shoulder, her body limp, and for a terrifying moment, he thought she was already gone. But then he felt the faint pulse again, struggling but present, and he hurried back to the chamber. The machine glowed faintly. As he approached, its lights responding to the presence of her body, Daniel placed her inside the cradle carefully, his hands shaking, and stepped back, unsure of what to do. The machine stirred with deeper light, symbols flashing across its surface, a soft hum filling the chamber. Her body seemed to sink into the glow, as if the machine recognized her and accepted her presence. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to believe this was the answer, but the fear that it could fail, or worse, kill her, gnawed at him. He leaned close, whispering again, not knowing if she could hear. "You're not dying here, not today, do you hear me? You're going to make it." His words echoed softly against the metal walls as the machine's light grew stronger, wrapping around her like a cocoon. For the first time since he found her, Daniel let himself pause. He had carried her through the wasteland, risked his life to bring her here, and now the outcome rested on forces beyond his control. His chest rose and fell heavily, his muscles aching, his throat raw, but his eyes never left her as the glow of the alien machine surrounded her fragile body. The emotional core, the chamber filled with a low hum that echoed through the walls, like the slow heartbeat of the earth. Daniel stood by the alien machine, his eyes fixed on the faint glow that now surrounded the girl. She lay motionless inside the cradle of light, her chest rising and falling so faintly he could barely tell if she was still breathing. The strange symbols across the machine's surface shifted and pulsed, patterns that meant nothing to him, yet felt deliberate, like words being written by hands he could not see. He clenched his fists at his sides, torn between hope and dread. He had no way of knowing if he had saved her or doomed her. The air was cooler here than outside, carrying the scent of metal and something sharper, almost medicinal. He paced in. Circles around the chamber, restless, glancing back at her every moment, as if afraid she might vanish into the light. Sweat dripped from his face, stinging his eyes, and his arms still ached from the long carry through the wasteland. But none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the fragile figure lying within the glow. He found himself speaking again, his voice rough but steady. "You hear me in there? You're not alone. You're not going to be another body left behind in the dirt. You're going to live." His words filled the chamber, soft against the mechanical hum. He did not know why he spoke to her, why he felt the need to fill the silence, but the thought of her drifting away without a voice to follow made him uneasy. Maybe it was not for her. Maybe it was for himself, to keep his own doubts at bay. Minutes passed like hours. The light wrapped tighter around her body, flickering as though the machine struggled to find strength. At times the glow dimmed so much that Daniel's heart lurched, fearing it had failed, only to surge again in slow waves. He leaned closer, watching as her wound seemed to seal little by little, silver blood pulling back into glowing veins. Her chest rose deeper, air filling her lungs in steadier rhythm. Relief loosened his tight grip on the knife he had unconsciously kept ready, and he let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. She stirred. Only faintly at first, her head turning slightly, her lips parting as if she were trying to speak. The sound that left her was weak, a murmur shaped by a voice that had been silent too long. Daniel leaned close, straining to hear. He could not understand the words, but one syllable repeated, clear and insistent, carried by all the force she had left. It sounded like a plea, and though he did not know its meaning, he caught the essence of it. She was asking for something. She had lost. He thought he heard her say home. The word cut into him. He looked down at her fragile form, her alien features softened by pain and exhaustion, and for the first time he realized she was more than a stranger he had found dying in the dust. She was someone's daughter, someone who had lived through things he could not imagine, someone who carried memories of a place that no longer existed. She was not just a survivor of war. She was a person reaching for the one word that had meaning even across the divide between species. Home. Daniel sat beside the machine, his back resting against the cold wall, his body heavy with exhaustion. He kept his eyes on her, unwilling to let her out of sight. He spoke again, softer this time, as if sharing secrets with the silence. "I don't know where your home is. I don't even know if it still stands. But I know what it means to want it. I've walked this wasteland long enough to know what it's like to feel lost." His voice cracked, the words dragging old memories from the corners of his mind, memories of faces he could not save during the war, of places burned to ash. He closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself, before opening them again to the fragile glow in front of him. The girl's breathing grew steadier with time, though she remained weak. Her hand twitched slightly, fingers curling as if reaching for something. Without thinking, Daniel reached out and let his hand rest gently against hers. Her skin was cooler than human flesh, soft, with that faint glow running just beneath the surface, but the gesture was the same as any human would make. Her fingers tightened faintly around his. The contact sent a strange weight through his chest, a quiet confirmation that she was aware, that she felt him there. Hours slipped by. The light in the chamber shifted, dimming and brightening as though responding to her recovery. Daniel's thoughts drifted between fear of failure and stubborn determination. He considered what it would mean if she lived, if he brought her back to the camp, if others saw her. Most would call for her death, for fear she was a spy or a weapon. They would see only the enemy. But Daniel no longer saw that when he looked at her. He saw a fragile being who had survived when everything around her had been destroyed, who had asked for only one thing: home. He wondered what kind of world she had come from, what her people had been like before the war. The ruins around him whispered of cities built on light and stone, not so different from the cities humans had once built before tearing themselves apart. He tried to imagine her life before this wasteland, her family, her friends, the laughter of her people in places that were now nothing but ash. The thought made his throat tighten. At some point she opened her eyes again. Weak but steady, they glowed faintly in the dim light, focused on him. For a long moment they held each other's gaze, no words spoken, only silence filled with meaning neither could explain. She tried to form a sound, her lips trembling. He shook his head gently and whispered, "Save your strength. You're safe now." She blinked slowly, as if she understood. When she closed her eyes again, her hand remained around his, not letting go. Daniel leaned his head back against the wall, exhaustion pulling at him, but he did not sleep. He stayed there, hand in hand, with the alien girl he had found in the wasteland, keeping watch as the machine continued its quiet work. For the first time in years, in the middle of ruins and silence, he did not feel completely alone. The fight for survival the night had fallen outside the ruined outpost, though Daniel could not see the stars beyond the roof of broken towers. Darkness pressed through the cracks in the walls, carrying with it the restless whisper of the wind. Inside, the glow of the alien machine cast long shadows, painting the chamber in silver and blue. Daniel sat with his back straight, his knife across his knees, eyes fixed on the entrance of the room. His body screamed for rest, every muscle sore from the journey, yet sleep refused to come. The girl lay in the cradle of light, her breathing stronger now though still faint, and Daniel knew that if danger came, it would come here, to the one place where something still lived. It began as a vibration under the floor, so slight he thought. At first it was his tired body shaking. Then the hum grew louder, a low metallic rumble that spread through the chamber until dust fell from the ceiling. Daniel rose quickly, knife ready, heart pounding. The girl stirred weakly, her glowing eyes fluttering open for a moment, as if she too felt the disturbance. The machine responded with brighter pulses of light, its strange symbols flickering faster, warning of something unseen. Then he heard it, the grinding sound of metal against stone, heavy steps echoing from the hall beyond. Daniel knew that sound well. War machines. Old patrol units left behind after the fighting, programmed to kill anything that moved. He had avoided them many times before in the wasteland, but now there was no place to run. The girl was too weak to move, and the machine was her only chance at survival. He could not carry her away. He would have to face whatever came. The first of the machines emerged from the dark hallway, its frame tall and skeletal, glowing eyes scanning the chamber. Wires and rust clung to its body, but its weapon arm still hummed with power. Daniel ducked behind a slab of broken wall, gripping his knife tighter, though he knew it was a poor tool against steel. The machine advanced slowly, scanning the room, its gaze lingering on the girl in the cradle of light. Daniel felt ice grip his chest. If it fired, everything would be lost. He acted before he could think. With a shout he leapt from cover, throwing a piece of broken metal across the chamber. The sound clattered against the far wall, and the machine's head snapped toward it. Daniel dashed in the opposite direction, circling wide, his boots striking sparks against the floor. The machine turned back quickly, sensors locking onto him, and a beam of searing light fired past his shoulder, melting stone in a hiss of smoke. Heat burned his skin as he dove behind another piece of rubble. More steps echoed from the hallway. Another machine entered, smaller but faster, its limbs sharp and insect-like. Daniel's throat went dry. There were at least two, maybe more waiting. Outside, his mind raced. He could not fight them head-on. He needed to draw them away from the girl, keep their weapons pointed at him instead of the machine that was healing her. He darted out again, knife flashing in his hand. With all his strength, he hurled it at the smaller machine, striking between the plates of its head. Sparks burst, and the machine staggered with a screeching whine, but it did not fall. It turned on him with mechanical fury, limbs clattering across the floor as it charged. Daniel scrambled back, heart pounding, searching desperately for another weapon. His eyes caught a broken pipe lying among the rubble. He grabbed it, swung with both hands, and struck the machine's joint as it lunged. Metal cracked, wires split, and the limb gave way, sending it crashing to the ground. He kicked it hard, driving the pipe deeper into its exposed circuits until its light faded and it went still. The larger machine fired again, the beam striking the ground where he stood moments before. The shockwave threw him across the chamber, his back slamming into the wall. Pain tore through him, his vision blurring, but he forced himself up, spitting dust from his mouth. He saw the girl watching him from the cradle, her weak eyes wide with fear, her hand lifting as though reaching toward him, even in her fragile state. That single look gave him strength. He could not fail here. Daniel grabbed the fallen knife from the broken machine, his grip slick with sweat. He ducked behind a pillar as the larger unit advanced, its glowing eyes scanning, its weapon humming as it prepared another shot. The machine was slow, heavy with age, but one direct hit would end him. He breathed hard, his chest heaving, and waited until it stepped closer. When it did, he sprang out, rushing low. The beam fired, slicing the air above him, and he slammed the knife into the exposed wires along its leg. Sparks exploded, the machine jerking violently, but still, it swung its weapon down at him. He rolled aside, the blast scorching the floor where he had been, then leapt onto its back, gripping the broken frame. With a roar, he drove the knife again and again into the gaps of its armor, tearing cables loose, striking deep until the machine shuddered and collapsed under its own weight. It fell hard to the floor, thrashing before going still, its glow fading into silence. Daniel staggered back, breathing hard, covered in dust and sweat. His arms shook, his legs barely holding him upright, but the chamber was quiet again. Only the low hum of the healing machine remained. He turned to the girl. Her eyes were open, glowing softly, fixed on him. She looked fragile still, but alive, and her lips curved faintly as though she understood what he had done for her. She raised her hand weakly, and Daniel stepped forward, letting her fingers brush against his arm. He sank to his knees beside her, exhaustion crashing through him now that the fight was over. His chest burned, his muscles ached, but he felt something else too, a fire inside that had nothing to do with fear or anger. It was the determination that had carried him across the wasteland, the same force that had made him lift her instead of leaving her to die. She was alive because of him, and though he did not know what tomorrow would bring, in this moment it was enough. The ruins trembled faintly, as if warning that more machines might come. But Daniel stayed close, refusing to move her until the healing was finished. He whispered softly, his voice rough but certain, "You're safe. I'll keep you safe." The words were a promise, not only to her but to himself. Resolution. The night stretched long inside the ruins, and Daniel sat with his back against the cold wall, his eyes fixed on the alien girl who lay within the cradle of light. The battle with the machines had left his body bruised and heavy, every breath carrying the ache of exhaustion, but he refused to let his eyes close. The chamber still hummed with the strange rhythm of the healing machine, its glow rising and falling like waves, and Daniel knew he had to stay alert. Even if more dangers came, he would not leave her side. As the hours passed, the machine's light grew gentler, less urgent, as though its work was nearing completion. The girl's chest rose in steady rhythm now, her breaths no longer shallow and broken, but calm and strong. The glow of her veins was brighter, steady lines of blue flowing beneath her skin like rivers of light. Daniel felt something inside him ease, a tight knot of fear loosening for the first time since he had found her. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, watching as her eyelids fluttered. Slowly, she opened her eyes, and they glowed with quiet life, no longer the fading embers he had seen in the wasteland, but living fire. She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze steady. Daniel's throat tightened. He had not known if she would ever wake, if all his effort would end with silence, but now here she was, alive, staring at him with a kind of wonder. Her lips parted, and though her voice was weak, a sound escaped, soft and fragile, shaped by her strange language. He could not understand the words, but he felt their weight, the tone carrying gratitude deeper than speech. Daniel reached out slowly, and she lifted her hand to meet his. Their fingers touched, her skin cool against his calloused palm. And though neither spoke the same tongue, the meaning was clear. She was alive because he had chosen not to walk away. She was alive because he had fought when it would have been easier to let go. In that touch, there was no war, no division of species, no history of destruction, only two lives bound by a single act of compassion. The machine's glow dimmed fully now, its task complete, leaving the chamber in soft shadow. Daniel helped her sit up carefully, his hand steadying her fragile frame. She moved slowly, her body still weak, but strength was returning with each breath she drew. She looked around the ruined room with wide eyes, sadness flickering across her face as though she remembered what this place had once been. When she turned back to him, her lips trembled with words he could not follow. But then she spoke one in broken, hesitant sound, a word shaped almost into his own language. Home. The sound was rough, but Daniel heard it clear, and his chest tightened again. He nodded slowly. Home, he repeated, though he knew neither of them could return to the worlds they once knew. But the word was not about a place. It was about belonging, about a reason to keep walking through the wasteland. For a time they sat in silence, sharing only the quiet presence of one another. Daniel thought of the camp where the other scavengers waited, thought of how they would react to her, how suspicion and fear would rise in their eyes. But he also thought of the moment her hand had closed around his in the dust, of the way she had clung to life when all hope seemed gone. He could not leave her behind now, not after everything. If the camp rejected her, then he would find another path. The wasteland was wide, and there were always places to hide, places where two souls could survive together. When dawn came, the faint light filtered through the broken roof of the outpost, painting the chamber in gold. Daniel rose to his feet, stretching sore muscles, then offered his hand to her. She hesitated only a moment before taking it, rising slowly from the cradle that had kept her alive. She was unsteady at first, leaning against him, but there was determination in her steps. Together they walked out of the chamber, leaving the silent machine behind. The wasteland awaited them, endless and harsh. But as they stood at the broken gates of the outpost, Daniel felt the weight of despair lift. The sky was still choked with dust, the ground still cracked and scarred, yet he no longer saw only ruin. He saw possibility, the chance of something new. The girl looked out as well, her glowing eyes reflecting the dim light of the sun, and, for the first time since he had found her, there was no fear in her face. They moved forward slowly, step by step, the silence between them filled not with emptiness, but with quiet understanding. Daniel knew there would be challenges ahead. Machines still roamed the wasteland. Scavengers would not welcome her, and danger never truly slept. But he also knew that they carried something stronger than fear. They carried hope. He glanced at her, and she met his eyes, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles. It was enough to tell him that the choice he made in the dust had mattered. That saving one life could mean more than any battle won or lost. He tightened his grip on her hand, steady and firm, a promise that whatever came, they would face it together. The wasteland stretched before them, endless and uncertain, but no longer empty. Where once there had been only silence and death, now there was a bond that could not be broken. Daniel walked on, carrying with him the memory of the night he had found her and the certainty that, in saving her, he had also saved something within himself. The wind rose, scattering dust across the ground, but they did not stop. Ahead lay a journey neither could predict, but it was theirs to make. And though the world had been broken by war, though the ruins whispered of loss, two figures moved through it side by side, carrying a fragile light that might one day grow into more. For in the wasteland, where all seemed lost, a human had chosen compassion, and an alien had chosen to trust. Together they stepped forward into the unknown, no longer strangers but survivors bound by hope. And that hope, fragile though it was enough to begin again. The end